the Green Corn Rebellion show. I'm here with uh, Chris from the Eat the Rich podcast, one of my favorite podcasts.
Oh,
How are you
thank
doing
you.
today?
Oh, I'm doing well, man. I'm doing real well.
That's good.
Yeah, my full name is Chris Smith, which, I don't really care tremendously about sharing. I'm like basically undoxable. I don't think you could ever, it's like the most common name probably in the country. I don't think there's anything bad anybody could do with my full name. So, yeah, it's Chris Smith.
Very cool. So, where are you from, and where'd you grow up at?
Well, right now I live on Long Island, which is, Long Island, New York, which is just, frankly, awful. And I kind of want to get out of here as quickly as possible. But I grew up in Virginia. I grew up in Richmond, Virginia. My family's from, some of my family's from New York, but most of my family's from like Georgia and Florida, Alabama, places like that. So, even though I clearly lost any kind of Southern accent, I did, grow up and spend most of my life in Virginia. Lived in Colorado for a little while as well. Lived in California for a few years, but Virginia primarily.
All right. Tell me a little bit more about your upbringing and your childhood.
Oh shit, man! Oh, we're getting in depth here. I don't know. I grew up not technically in Richmond, in the suburb of Richmond in Chesterfield County called Midlothian. It was suburban upbringing. I was an only child. I do have a few half brothers and half sisters from my dad's previous marriage, but I'm the only child of my mom and dad. So I was raised an only child. We we weren't broke. I would say maybe it was what you might call a lower middle class upbringing, I suppose. We definitely was no by no means raised as any kind of child of privilege, but I wasn't raised in poverty or anything.
All right. So how did you become a leftist? What shaped your politics?
Well, I'd say probably the first thing that really my first kind of exposure to any sort of left-wing politics was well, I was always like, even as a child, like my mom was like a Clinton, Bill Clinton liking Democrat. So even before I had any understanding of politics myself, I probably considered myself a Democrat. But then I guess I was in like seventh grade, and I started getting into it was when I guess probably was sixth grade was when the Battle of Los Angeles, the Rage Against the Machine album came out, right? And I got really into Rage Against the Machine, and I got all of their CDs, and that was my first exposure to, I guess what you'd call any sort of radical politics. And it was one of their first albums, either the first or the second one. It might have been Evil Empire, it might have been the self-titled debut album, but like in the CD liner notes, there was like some recommended reading list or something, you know what I'm saying? It's like some website, I believe, that, we could go to read some sort of like radical literature and stuff, and sort of like kind of went down the rabbit hole there, and started learning things about like Mamiya Abu-Jabbar and stuff like that, and Che Guevara and guerrilla. I remember reading some of guerrilla warfare, and then I discovered like Abby Hoffman's Steal This Book and stuff like that. I just just sort of like vague like radical literature from the 60s and 70s, even though it was still rather aimless, and didn't really know what I was getting into. And I really I hated George W. Bush. Like, I remember when the 2000 election happened, I remember, like, even though I was like 12 or 13 years old, I remember I was very, very aware of like how wrong this is, and like the fact that George W. Bush very clearly, stole this election, from Al Gore, specifically in Florida. And then it was really the war in Iraq. That really, like, that was like any sort of like faith in institutions or any sort of like faith in the government or the presidency, to do the right thing. When the war in Iraq happened, it was really, I was young, but I was like, man, this is really egregious. This is really fucked up. So, and kind of went from there. During the Obama years, I'd say I got kind of apathetic. I still followed the news a little bit, but I kind of tuned out for a while, because I just remember, like, when Obama was running, and he was running on this like very real uh, grassroots kind of movement, this reaction to the George W. Bush administration, which was an absolute disaster, And I remember, like, there was this palpable wave of energy behind Barack Obama, and especially, like, specifically, the first black president, and like this very cool, like, groundbreaking kind of thing. And then I just remember, like, once he gets in office, like, I mean, the first thing he starts doing is bailing out the banks and, signing into law the Bush tax cuts. And I remember that, like, do you remember the beer summit? Do you remember when that fucking shithead cop, like, arrested that guy, like, or whatever, like, trying to get, into his own home, and then, like, this obvious case of injustice and racial profiling, and then Barack Obama do except invite both of them to the White House in this, like, weird photo op, like, well, we can all get along, and and it was that, and then it was like, not getting out of Iraq, not getting out of Afghanistan, and in fact expanding, the wars. And I just remember, like man, like we really had this moment, we really had this, like, grassroots popular movement, this reaction against a deeply unpopular right-wing president. And it's just like, it just felt like Obama did everything possible to just, like, completely evaporate that that left-wing movement. And it just, like, it really sort of disillusioned me. And I kind of tuned out for a little while, obviously until Trump came along, and so yeah, and it was really been since the election of Trump that I really kind of started recommitting myself and getting back into to left-wing politics.
How did you end up starting Eat the Rich with Shane and Dwight? How'd that come about?
Well, we all really met. Like, we didn't know each other until we obviously we met through Twitter, but we all got thrown into this big group DM just randomly, like probably a year and a half ago now, a little over a year ago. And I don't know, we just became real close, through that, and we started talking a lot. And and then we all, the first time, because we all lived in, Shane has since moved, but at the time we all lived, in the New York area. And I guess it was actually May Day. It was May 1st of last year. We all met in the city. We were going to go to this event together, and then we all met for the first time, and we just had this, like, very instant sort of rapport and ease of talking to each other, and this friendship. And then I mean, we kind of joked about it. Like, I really never thought that I would ever do this, start a podcast or anything. But then we got invited, the three of us and a couple other, my friend Mike as well. We got invited on Jared Holt's Shitpost podcast, like, as guests. And so that was sort of like the nexus of us, being on a podcast together. And yeah, we really liked it. And I just remember, like, after that, just almost instantly having the conversations, like, okay, like, when are we're starting our own, right? Because we just had such a good time on Jared. So, like, really, we have, we owe a lot we owe a lot to Jared Holt for inviting us on his originally, because without that, we may not have ever started our own.
All right. And how did you come up with the name? Why did you decide to name it Eat the Rich?
That wasn't my choice. I think Shane came up with that. I mean, it's a common phrase. Everybody's heard that phrase. Why not? I mean, I think really it made sense because, what we wanted to do, kind of set ourselves apart was to instead of doing like because there's a million like recapping like we didn't want to go the Chapo angle. We didn't want to like have a weekly thing where we recap the news and talk about current events. We didn't want to focus so much on current events, even though we do a little bit. But what we really wanted to focus on was sort of detailing and profiling the specific people.
Yeah.
The specific people that are among what we would call the 1%. Because we talk about the 1%, and we talk about the ruling class, we talk about the wealthy, and this sort of like these sort of sometimes these vague terms, and what we really wanted to do was every week pick a specific person or a few specific people, like especially heinous and terrible examples of the ruling class, and profile them. And so I guess with that being the angle we were taking, I guess the name just made sense.
All right. I like it. It's really informative. I listen whenever you guys put out new stuff. It's really informative stuff. So I like the angle of how you guys talk.
Oh, thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate it.
So what are some of your thoughts on the presidential race so far? What do you think about the results from Super Tuesday?
I mean, it's disappointing, obviously. I mean, I'm not as pessimistic or as as black-pilled maybe as some people are, because if you put it in perspective, Joe Biden was solidly the front runner for a while, for a long time. For like most of last year, from the time he entered the race, he was the front runner. I mean, all the polls, and it's like we know, obviously, a lot of those polls are skewed because a lot of those polls, are calling landlines. They're calling, if you got a landline, you're probably older, you probably have a little bit more money, you're probably a homeowner. So polls like that tend to skew to someone like Joe Biden. But I mean, Joe Biden is the one that they want to coronate. We all knew that was coming. I just really hoped that because Joe Biden is so uniquely terrible at running for president, and every time he does, he finds some new way to completely and utterly shit the bed and drop out. I was sort of hoping that would happen, and when he sort of fell off, and like Buttigieg, sort of became the moderate candidate that the media was talking about and stuff, and so really we only had about a month there where Joe Biden was not what you would call the front runner. I mean, it was this exciting sort of month, especially in Iowa and New Hampshire and Nevada and stuff, and where Bernie really looked like he was going to run away with it. Of course, as we would expect, they're not going to let it be that easy for us. So obviously they pulled this fucking ridiculous fucking red wedding type thing, like on the eve of Super Tuesday, where fucking Buttigieg drops out and Klobuchar drops out, and they circle the wagons around Biden, try to really one last Hail Mary to make him the nominee. But even with that, it's still neck and neck. It's still neck and neck. We're by no means out of it. What that really means for you and me, and for anybody else listening who's all in for Sanders. I mean, don't give up. We gotta work harder here. If you're making phone calls for Bernie, make more phone calls. If you're texting for Bernie, text more. If you're canvassing, canvass more. And if you're not doing any of those things, consider doing what you can. Consider this is our chance. Consider putting a little bit of work to help this thing happen. If you can afford it, obviously donate. Because it's not over yet. And I think that probably a good thing is that now that it's narrowed, the field is narrowed pretty much to just Sanders and Biden. And so much of the spotlight is now going to be on Biden, where he's sort of been spared the spotlight a little bit over the past couple months. And obviously we're talking more and more about Biden and his terrible history with cutting Social Security cuts and his fucked up views on abortion and the Anita Hill stuff, and his general just fucking creepiness and obviously his cognitive decline. Like all of these things are going to be, in the spotlight more. And he just doesn't do well in the spotlight. He doesn't, the more he's on camera, the more opportunities there's going to be for him to fuck up and say stupid shit. And, it's going to help us, especially I think the debate coming up, because it sounds like they've sort of fucked Tulsi Gabbard out of an appearance in the upcoming debate. So the debate, which I believe is going to be on March 15th, is just going to be Sanders and Biden, and that's very important. That's very important, and I hope that Sanders comes out and doesn't pull any punches, and really hammers him, because we've still really got an opportunity to win this. Never underestimate Joe Biden's ability to fuck up a presidential race, because he still can.
Yeah. So I think you guys a few weeks ago you were talking about like what if Sanders loses and in 4 years is another presidential race? Who would be the leftist candidate that would be able to carry on the movement? Do you know? Like, do you have any ideas of who that might be?
It's hard to say. It's hard to say, especially because I believe AOC will be 35 if I'm not mistaken. But I mean, just look at look at how many leftists have cropped up in American politics just since 2016. Kind of on the tail of Bernie's popular movement that really began in 2015, 2016. I mean, Ilhan Omar and Tlaib and AOC and all these people, who's to say who else is going to crop up over the next 4 years? Who's to say? It's hard to predict. It's hard to know what kind of people we're going to be looking at in a few more years. I'm very optimistic that in 2022, in the next midterm, we'll elect a lot more left-wing people. If 2018 was any indicator. So, it's hard to say who's gonna carry on the torch after Bernie. But I just think that we're going to have more and more opportunities, and more people are going to present themselves.
Yeah. Let's see here. So who are some of your favorite music artists?
Oh man. So I mean, honestly, probably more than any other band, I would say the Grateful Dead. Really, I haven't so much been listening to them nowadays, but probably more than any other single band, or maybe more than any other single thing at all. They really influenced sort of for better or worse, sort of influenced the entire trajectory of my life. I mean, frankly, they were tremendously important to me, like all through high school and to college. And when I say I used to go to concerts, I used to do full tours and go city to city, and obviously I never saw. I was a little bit too young to have ever seen Jerry Garcia and the Grateful Dead, but all the remaining members of the band, all the remaining side projects and stuff. Dozens and dozens and dozens, probably over 100 times I've seen various incarnations of the Grateful Dead. Fish as well. Fish is probably the band I listen to the most nowadays. I was very into that whole like jam band scene and raves as well. I was into like EDM music and stuff a lot in college. But nowadays I'll tell you what I like. I like a lot of like, I guess what you'd call proto-punk. I like the stuff that before punk music, the stuff that influenced punk music, the stuff that punk music had its roots in. I like a lot of I like Richard Hell and the Voidoids. I like the Velvet Underground. I like the Kinks. I like a lot of sort of lo-fi garage rock type stuff. I like 70s glam rock a lot. I like T-Rex, and I like the New York Dolls and Bowie and stuff. But I really like country music as well. I like a lot of country and a lot of bluegrass. I play a little bit of guitar myself, and when I do, it's primarily like folk, country influenced stuff, bluegrass influenced stuff. Older country, like outlaw country, like Merle Haggard and Hank Jr. and Waylon Jennings and stuff like that. Not so much the stuff that's on the country radio nowadays. I'm really not. I don't know a whole lot of that.
All right. What's your favorite Rage Against the Machine song?
Oh God, I'd say probably a better question is my favorite album. I really like their first album a lot.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, no. As far as like, let me think of specific songs. I like "Bulls on Parade" a lot. I like "Testify." God, what's some of the stuff off their first album? I mean, like when I used to like a lot of times at the gym, I'll just just their first album. I'll just play it front to back. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
But no, they were huge. They were when I first discovered them. I was huge into them. So sorry, I know you were hoping that I was more into metal, but I'm not. I know that's your thing.
Were you ever into System of a Down?
No.
Really?
No. I don't even think I could name one of their songs. No.
Okay. All right.
Is that even what you consider metal? I really don't know anything about them. So like the thing I always say about metal is that I respect metal musicians because it's so like, especially like metal guitarists and stuff, like they're so technically talented, you know, from like a music theory type of standpoint. You know what I'm saying? Like I respect them, you know, because they're clearly so talented a lot of the time. But I just like I don't feel it in my soul. I just like it just doesn't hit me there. You know, it's not something I was ever able to get into. As a matter of fact, I don't know if you're familiar with. I'm sure you are. I don't know if you're into Lamb of God at all, but
Sure they are. Yeah.
yeah, Randy Blythe from that band. Like we're from the same hometown. Like we're both from Richmond, and it's been quite a few years since I've seen him. But like we used to hang out, you know, several years back when I still lived in Virginia. But I just like, and I know he's like a very very well known, very popular, in a very well known and popular metal band. But I just like. I just like never listened to his music, you know, even like knowing him on a personal level. I just like, I don't know. I just never got into it. You know, a lot of my friends were.
All right. Last thing I wanted to talk about was your old account at MullerDad69.
Oh yeah.
Starbucks tweet. So
Yeah, man.
tell me about that tweet. What inspired you to write the tweet? Well, let me close the tweet for a minute.
Yeah, sure.
What I'm talking about. All right. So here it is. I'm the manager of Starbucks in Charlotte, North Carolina. I've informed my employees that they will be fired on the spot if I hear them say Merry Christmas to any customers. I'm doing it because I personally dislike conservative Christians. Now, what was your thought process behind that tweet before you tweeted it? How did you feel when it blew up and eventually got your account suspended?
Yeah, I mean, my thought process beforehand, I was just being an asshole. I mean, quite frankly, I was just trying to, you know, there's obvious bait. I was just trying to bait people. In fact, I had a couple follow up like that. Like it's only that first tweet because obviously the account has been suspended, but it's only that first tweet that's really like survived in screenshots. But I had a couple other tweets threaded to it, like just got off the phone with corporate. They know what I'm doing and they're okay with it. And like, just to be clear, I'm doing this to punish Trump supporters. And I mean, obviously, to anybody with half a brain, it's obviously a troll and it's obviously bait. But man, it's just the kind of thing that like. Because there's been so many tweets like that. Like I'm sure you remember Randy G. Dub's tweet back in the 2016. It was like, work at the post office in Columbus, Ohio, and I'm tearing up all the absentee ballots for Trump, and like that blew up in a similar sort of way. So like, it's so formulaic at this point that it's like not even. It's a joke that shouldn't even work anymore, but it always does. Yeah. And so no, I mean, yeah, it blew up. way bigger than I could have ever anticipated. Especially because Congressman Steve King ended up getting a hold of it and and posting it. He fell for it and he posted that on his Facebook.
Yeah.
But no, they were really mad. They were really. It hit all the sweet spots. It hit all the sweet spots. It hit the war on Christmas sweet spot. It hit all the. It pressed all the buttons of conservative resentment and grievance. It hit the war on Christmas thing. It hit the Starbucks things. Remember, around that same period of time, they were all pissed off about Starbucks, as they almost always seem to be. But like specifically around that time, there was supposedly that story about the cop having pig written on his cup, and so there was a lot of like they were already angry about Starbucks, and so it was sort of like the perfect storm to really piss them off. And man, I've had bigger tweets, but like I've never had so many like replies and like quote tweets, and then like people kept seeing stuff about it on Facebook. Like I like went on Facebook and I searched for my Twitter handle like MullerDad69, and like I found all these posts about it on like in like conservative Facebook groups. And like the funniest one I saw was this guy like wrote this whole long, like several paragraph long thing about how he was trying to find me, and like he said he'd like he's like I called Starbucks corporate, like I'll call every Starbucks in the Charlotte area if I have to, like I already called a couple of them and they laughed at me and hung up, and it's like like I'm gonna find this asshole. And so obviously like once Steve King got a hold of it, it was literally like an hour later that my account got suspended. And but the funniest part of it to me was that like Starbucks themselves like literally made a statement about it. Like they did a tweet from their account that was like, like added me and everything, like Chris MullerDad69, blah blah blah. Like there's not, is not a manager, and his account has been suspended for impersonation. I think that's so funny that like literally, probably because of me, there was some like behind the scenes like communication between Twitter and Starbucks about like how to handle this situation. It's like it really blew up like that, like after Steve King fell for it. Steve King, one of the most gullible men in Congress. He's got to be, because I don't know if you remember. That's not even the first time he's fallen for some shit like that. Do you remember last July? It was on the 4th of July when Ken Klippenstein he added Steve King with that picture of Jack Nicholson from A Few Good Men, and said like, this is my uncle, like can we get a retweet, to celebrate, he's a veteran on the 4th of July, blah 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 blah. And like, man, like it really, like that really blew my mind, because like what the fuck does Steve King do with his free time if he doesn't recognize Jack Nicholson? Like one of the most famous and recognizable actors of the past like 40 or 50 years, and like he doesn't recognize a picture of him from one of his most famous roles. And it's like, man, what kind of fucking psychopath does Steve King have to be? Like, what does he do with his free time? Like, he clearly doesn't watch movies. Is he just like fucking like throw puppies into the river? Like, it's like, what does he do? Like, what kind of like just cold, utter fucking psycho does this man have to be?
Yeah, I remember your tweet. It got mentioned on some of the big lefty news shows like Majority Report.
Oh yeah, that's right.
And I was cool.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know how I figured out it was on the Young Turks, because I don't really watch the Young Turks, but I found out it was on the Young Turks.
I think Ken tweeted about it.
Yeah, and then I watch Majority Report all the time, and I just remember them having it on, and I was like, "Oh my god!" And I sent it to Dwight, and he didn't know, and he was like, "Oh my god!" Like that was
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so I got suspended, but I really I expected, and I'm pretty used to getting suspended. I think that was the longest I've ever held on to an account. I had that account for 9 months, I guess from March or April of last year through December, which was a really good long stretch of time, because I typically don't hold on to accounts for that long. So I was fine with getting suspended for that. In fact, on my new account, I've already I've already got more followers than I did on that one. So it's all good.
It's good. You're a legend.
I'll just continue to get suspended. It's fine. I really, at this point, like, I'm just content in knowing that I'm just going to be one of those guys that just constantly keeps getting suspended and keeps coming back and having to like rebuild followers and stuff. That's all right. Like I'm like a marked man, you know, like I'm tweeting behind a VPN, like like, you know, like they'll you know, they'll just do, because at this point, like, you know, they'll suspend me just for evading a permanent ban. Like if they figure out it's me, like I don't even have to. I could be on perfect behavior. I could be a complete saint on this account, and they, you know, they could still potentially suspend me any day now. I'm surprised I've lasted this long.
Yeah. So what was okay, so why did you have the handle MullerDad69? Like, what is the story behind that specific name? That's weird.
It's very weird. Yeah. In fact, I hated it. In fact, honestly, I hate like the only Twitter @ that I've ever had that I like actually really liked was @ Dinar Deals for Bets, and like I got that one suspended in like a day, so I can't use that one anymore. But no, so the MullerDad69 post, our account, like that was my alt. That was the alt I'd used. You know, I had like another main account before the MullerDad account, and the MullerDad account was an alt. But what it originally was, before I made it my main account, it was like like a compilation account of like really shitty or dumb like resistance takes. So it was like MullerDad69, and like the avatar, like the profile picture was that picture of like the shirtless Robert Mueller cartoon from the Krasenstein's children's book. So like that's where the name comes from, because originally it was like a shitty resistance takes compilation account. And then so once I made it my main, I just kept it. I don't know why.
Hilarious. Oh my god. Well, thank you for coming on. I really enjoyed this. Well,
oh yeah, absolutely, man.
Yeah. Where can we find you on social media, and where can we listen to Eat the Rich?
Yeah. So, you know, right now, currently, you can find me, again, another handle that I just am growing to despise. It's Tony Beast 1957. And the story with that one is that like when I first came back on this account, I was trying to lie low a little bit, and it's like I wasn't using my, you know, like recognizable avatar. So I was like, I was named Tony Bancy, and I was like pretending to be like a 62-year-old whatever, like old Italian dude from Long Island. So that was the character, that was the bit. So that's why the handle is Tony Beast 1957. So you can find me there on Twitter. As far as Eat the Rich, yeah, you can find us on you know, the Apple podcast app, Spotify, SoundCloud, anywhere you get. We're available anywhere you get podcasts, and at patreon.com/eattherich. You know, you can sign up for $5 a month. We've just launched the Patreon, and you know, in addition to the free episode that we're putting out every week, we're you know, if you're interested, we're putting out an additional premium episode a week as well. So that's been really fun, and like we're really we're trying to kind of experiment a little bit with the premium episodes and try some different type of you know, some different type of angles, some different type of shows. We've been doing some more like conversational type shows, but what we really want to do is sort of like focus on some more specific topics that that each of us are passionate about. I know that Dwight did like a solo episode that was like heavily focused on economics, and you know, like I think me and Shane, we want to do our own sort of series. It's going to be on like the history of the CIA and the OSS and United States intelligence services and stuff like that. I kind of want to do like a more historical, like long form series on Barry Goldwater and sort of like the birth of the modern Republican Party. So we've got a number of different things that we're you know, we're trying to put out there for the Patreon subscribers. So if, you know, that kind of stuff interests you, you know, check us out on Patreon.
All right. Thanks, man.
All right, buddy. Yeah, I appreciate it, man. Anytime.